baby boomer fans. We are Jackie and Janine, the Pfeiffer sisters, and love to talk about the 1950s, inviting you to reminisce with us as we explore experiences of that decade. Grab your favorite malt or Green River, make sure you are wide awake, and get ready to be inspired about the 1950s. Welcome to the 1950s Fun Chat. Hi, friends. Hi, neighbors. Hi, everyone who's tuning in, maybe for the first time, to our 1950s Fun Chat, where you can learn so much more about the decades of the 1950s as spoken by those people who lived then. Right, Jackie?
Indeed, indeed. But if you look at the upper corner of my book, of my screen, you'll see the book that spurred the 1950s Fun Chat. This book is called While the Windmill Watched, A Slice of Rural America in the 1950s. So that I will, if you go to our website, which is down below, WWII, While the Windmill Watched, you'll be able to learn of all the vendors that carry our book, of the events that our authors may be attending, the other vendors besides our book, our main one, which is North Dakota State University Bookstore, and all of the previous 203, this will be 204, Fun Chats. There's a lot of history, folks. You could spend days just learning about history of the Central Plains. So we will begin now. During this Fun Chat, today we will speak of the surviving pioneer spirit of the Central Plains. Our guest, Martha Bergquist, was born in 1959. So along with her brother and sister, she was raised on a farm in Harlan County, Nebraska. Her parents, both sets of grandparents, and a large extended family influenced her sense of roots and the importance of family. Martha attended the one-room school in which she later taught. She holds degrees in education as well as a master's degree in nursing. She has taught in one-room schoolhouses, homeschooled, and taught middle school and high school and college nursing students. Martha loves being a nurse, but teaching is her passion. She still holds a nursing license, and she is currently teaching middle school language arts. She also owns a quilting business entitled Spring Creek Quilts and Creations. Martha lives about a mile down Spring Creek from the location of the dugout where her family put down roots. Her 9 married children have given Martha and her husband 24 grandchildren. Some of them live on the farm. Others are scattered from coast to coast. So Martha, we welcome you to the 1950s Fun Chat.
Good morning.
Yes, good morning.
So you have said that your paternal grandmother was the person who taught you everything. So please tell us more about this meaningful influence in your life.
Well, we called her Granny Mildred, and that was her name, Mildred. And she was an old-fashioned granny, to be sure. I loved to go and spend time at her house because it was like stepping back in history. She made her own lye soap and used a wringer washing machine until I left, I think almost till I left for college. She butchered her own chickens, and she would butcher every morning because you wanted fresh chickens.
Oh.
And you got the eggs twice a day because you didn't want them to be sitting in the nest too long. And, she had rules. She would cook for hired men at lunchtime, and there was always a wash basin and a towel on the back line. It wasn't truly like growing up before electricity hit our part of the country. And in Harlan County, electricity came into being in the early 1950s, like 50 or 51. But it didn't get to our farm until the middle 1950s. I can remember my dad saying, and they milked cows at that time. Of course, everybody milked cows. But he said, my sister and I milked cows every day until the day I left for college, and then my mom sold all the cows.
Yeah.
And that would have been in the 1955. So electricity didn't come to our part of the country until the mid 50s. And the same way with the telephone. We had a party line telephone until, well, I can remember when I was in high school, we still had a party line telephone because that's just how it was. We were kind of in the middle of nowhere, and progress was slow getting there.
Yes.
So
yes.
that's kind of how I grew up, doing everything from the beginning.
Yes.
My grandma taught me to bake bread. She taught me to make pies. She taught me how to iron. And of course, she sprinkled the clothes and rolled them nicely and properly and did them in the right order and all those things.
Mhm.
And those were the things that I grew up knowing.
Yeah.
I can remember, and this is the truth, we lived a half a mile away from her, and there was a big hill between my house and her house. And there was a dam, and it was pasture on both sides of the road, but it was just a dirt road. And a dam on both sides of the road, and a big hill. Down the hill you went and up the other side for half a mile. And my brother and I would ride our tricycles from our house to grandma's house. And they were small tricycles. That was a lot of pedaling.
Oh, man.
When we got a little older, we would talk somebody into helping us saddle the horse, and then we didn't have to ride our tricycle.
So when I imagine those what do you call them? They're not the wheels, but the pedals. The pedals.
Yeah.
They probably were going like crazy going down.
Oh, yeah. Those were probably 8 or 10-inch wheels on that tricycle. They were small.
Did you ever get off the trikes and walk uphill pushing your trike?
Nope, we pedaled. Oh. I'm pretty sure that's why I was on the track team when I was in college and high school.
No kidding.
You had those muscles were trained. Huh?
Yep.
Wow. And so then did your brother have as much contact with your grandma as you did?
No, he would go with my grandpa and my dad, and they were farming. So he went with them all the time. But he was a year and a half younger than I was. So he would, a lot of times he would ride his trike with me over there, and then grandpa would be there. They'd been working in the corrals or in the shop, and then he would hang out with grandpa and my dad.
Uh-huh.
Fun.
Does he claim that those times with your grandpa and dad to really giving him the knowledge that he needed to be in farming and ranching now?
Absolutely. My grandpa was a locally famous horse trader. That's what he did. He bought and sold horses all the time, and he loved it. That was his passion. Mm-hmm. Horses were his passion. And my dad had that passion as well.
Did he have a lot of horses around then all the time, or they pretty much come in and go out?
Well, they would come in and go out, but there were always probably, I don't know, 8 or 10 horses. I don't know. There were always a couple horses that he kept for us to ride. And he would be very careful that they were horses that were safe. I remember one time it was in the winter time, and the road was drifted shut. And we had been snowed in for a few days. And we had this old horse, and her name was Spot. And you can imagine, it was not anything special for 6 or 8 kids to be on Spot at one time. As many as we could fit on there without sliding off the back end was just fine with her. And so when our cousins would come, we would all ride Spot. But anyway, this particular day, it was just my brother and I, and we didn't have anybody to help us saddle the horse. So we thought we could do it, and we did it. And we thought we had the cinch tight enough, but we were pretty small. And she knew all the tricks about blowing out her belly when you'd tighten the cinch and all those good tricks.
Yeah.
Well, we were doing fine until we got about halfway between our house and grandma's house, and the snow plow came up behind us. And this should not have caused Spot any distress, but for some reason it did. And she took off, and we held on, but I had made a brand new loaf of bread, and I dropped it because when she took off, I had to grab the saddle horn and make sure my brother didn't fall off too. and I dropped my bread, and it got buried in the snow on the side of the road, and we never could find it.
Oh, bummer.
Good intentions.
But I still remember it because I was just like so proud of it. And then,
Yes.
there it is. It's gone.
Pride goeth before the fall, literally.
Exactly. Exactly. There was more than one time when the saddle would slip around onto her belly and off we'd go in a pile on the road, but she'd just stand there and wait for us.
Oh, good.
Well, was she a spot horse then?
Yeah, she was a big old, she was not beautiful at all. She was just old and safe.
That's the kind you want for your children.
Yes, yes.
Yes. So, anything more about your life with your grandma or your grandparents, either one, before we continue?
Let's see. I can remember my grandma always had a garden, and I loved to garden with her. And I grew a huge garden all my life until just the last 2 or 3 years. I've had a huge garden just because I loved it. And it was just something that we did together. And she taught me which things to plant by which things and which things to plant when. And the whole time I did things with my grandma, it was all work, but she told stories the whole time. And that's why I loved to hang out with her, because the stories she would tell were incredible.
Do you remember any one particular?
I remember her telling me about growing up how in the 30s, she was a young wife.
Yeah.
And I remember that she had 6 children. My dad was the third of 6 children. He had 3 younger sisters and 2 older sisters. He was the only boy. And I remember her telling me how when there was a new baby on the way, sometimes it just overwhelmed her because life was hard and things were scarce, and she felt that pressure all the time. And I remember her telling me about when she went to the hospital to have one of the babies, and I don't know which one it was, I can't remember, but you had to bring your own diaper pins. And she didn't have any diaper pins. And her mother brought her 2 diaper pins, and she remembered that. That was a story she told me as a little girl.
Yes. Whatever happened to those pins?
I don't know, but I wish I did.
Yeah.
I wish I did.
Perhaps they were tossed out after the last baby.
I don't know, but she had a basement in her house, and that's where she would she had the wringer washer downstairs. And oh my gosh, in the later years after she got electricity, there was a shower in the basement, but it was just a shower head and a drain.
Yes.
Electricity box right behind it. And we all showered there for 20 years. I mean, just nobody got electrocuted. That was God himself at work.
No kidding.
And I remember her telling me that for a long time she had a basement, but there were no stairs. There was just dirt, and she would have to slide down the dirt to the basement.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was very frontier living. And I don't remember her ever complaining about it, but I remember her telling the stories about it, and the hardness of it all just stuck with me as a child. And I don't remember it being because she complained, but more because those things were so incredible for me to understand.
Yeah. Were there rats, mice, whatever?
No, there were never any rats or mice that I can remember, and not even spiders. And I know that in the summertime they would sleep in the basement because there were 2 bedrooms down there, and it was much cooler. They did have air conditioning, but it was like a window unit, but they would sleep in the basement, and it was very nice and cool down there. But
no spiders. That's unusual.
No, I don't remember any of that. I do remember my grandma wasn't a drinker. Okay. She wasn't a drinker. She did communion on Sunday, and then, they had communion wine at the church at that time. Yeah. But she and her sisters would make elderberry wine every summer and put a balloon on top of the bottle and put it in the basement. And I don't know whatever happened to that wine because I don't ever remember anybody drinking it, but obviously they did.
Yes.
until one day my cousin and my brother snitched a glass and hid under the bed and drank it, and they got in big, big trouble.
Oh, maybe just sick.
So when without steps going to the basement, was this when she did laundry downstairs and would
Yes.
haul
Yes.
that
How did she get up?
I think I don't know how she did it, but that's what she's told me.
Yes. Do you
There must have been a
remember
rope.
Oh, do you
to pull
remember
herself
her
up.
as being a happy lady?
Very, very happy,
Uh-huh.
very capable, very strong. She was a godly woman. Every story she told me always had a scriptural basis, and she always made sure I knew what it was.
Oh, wonderful. Well,
She was
well
just one of
educated.
those kind of grandmas.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well learned. Fantastic.
Yes.
Well, that was very informative. Now, tell us about the prisoner of war camp that was in your neighborhood from 1943 to 47. Not everyone has one of those.
No, and when I say it's in my neighborhood, it's probably not even 10 miles away, 8 miles, maybe 7 or 8 miles. And it was a big camp, because even as a little girl, the foundations to those buildings were there. And I can remember every time we drove by them, my mom and my dad would say, well, there's where the prisoner of war camp was. But my grandma and grandpa would tell stories about it, because they would get the prisoners from the camp to come and work on the farm. And my grandpa always had some of those guys helping at the farm as hired men. During harvest, or when there was a lot of work to do on the farm, he would go and get a couple prisoners from the camp and bring them to work. And a lot of the neighbors did that at the time. And my grandma was always talking about how they were wonderful people, and she felt like they were doing the right thing by helping them, and how thankful they always were to be able to work and to come get out of the camp and do that.
So,
And the house that I live in right now, which is actually over 100 years old, and then we've added on an addition to it. But the original part of the house has wood from that camp that was used in building it. And not in building it, but in the flooring, like all the oak floors, the old wood oak floors that are in this house came from the prisoner of war camp.
Martha,
so who were the prisoners?
Yeah.
They were German prisoners.
Okay. Uh-huh.
German. So
German prisoners, because this was during World War II.
Right. But were they shipped over, or were they people who were German descent in the United States?
No, they were prisoners who were from Germany. And many of them were actually just farmers. And they, in Germany, if they wouldn't fight, or if they were dissenters, then they were they wouldn't tolerate that. And a lot of them became, they were here as prisoners. Many of them came back with their families after the war.
Mm-hmm.
They all wanted sponsors so they could stay and bring their families over.
Mm-hmm. That was the silver lining, I guess, to being a prisoner.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
There were 3 or 4 of these camps in Nebraska, up and down the Republican River.
Okay.
Because I think there was one in Binkelman, which is way further west. And I know there was one further east in Nebraska. And I can't remember exactly how many there are, but there were several.
Mm-hmm. It would be interesting to speak with people who are descendants of these prisoners who now live in Nebraska.
Yes, it would. It would be. I don't know anyone like that, but
all right.
But I do know that there were some that stayed in our neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
As a little girl, there was a man and his wife who lived between our house and the prisoner of war camp, but he's since died, and they did not have children.
Okay. Mm-hmm. What an interesting lesson. And I'm wondering is why Nebraska was chosen. Why the state?
I don't know. Maybe because we were in the middle of nowhere.
Could be.
And the railroad was close by. Burlington Northern was just like less than a quarter of a mile from where the camp was.
Oh, sure.
Okay. Well, anything more? That's quite interesting. Anything more before we go on?
Well, I can say when I was talking about electricity coming to our county,
Yeah.
the electricity came here, but it came because of the Harlan County Reservoir, which was built after World War II as a work project. Okay. So
A
they built
CCC project?
they built
CC I'm sorry, go ahead.
What were you going to say?
I was going to say, was it a CCC project?
Yes. It was.
Okay.
Well, it was. Yes, it was, and it was built because we'd had a horrendous flood in on the Republican River, and so they needed this dam, and there were a series of dams that were built after the flood. The flood was, let me see what the date was, but the flood was in the 30s, I believe, late 30s. It hit 35, I believe, but it hit on Memorial Day, Memorial Weekend, and Memorial Day that weekend, and there were over 150 people killed up and down the river. The Republican River is usually just a little muddy trickle, very quiet and lots of sand and no big deal. But there had been a huge rain way out west, and down the river came this huge wall of water, and there were no dams at all along the river. And so from about McCook to way below Alma, which is, well, it was almost 100-mile length, because it started above McCook, before McCook, maybe Trenton, but the river was like a mile wide and wiped out farms and livestock and people on both sides, because there was no communication to warn people that it was coming. And it turned that shallow little river into a mess. And I guess the reason I thought of that is because I was thinking about the people in Texas, and how that river just turned into a torrent. Well, this river should never have been it was only because they'd had the big rain. And down the river it went. I know that my maternal grandfather on my mother's side was a teenager at the time, and he rescued some kids out of a tree between Alma and Orleans, which is below my house about 10 miles probably. And he got a medal, which he was always very proud to show us, because he had gotten this accommodation for rescuing these children out of a tree during the flood.
Amazing. Yeah.
But that's why the dam was built, was a series of dams to help with that flooding, and also for irrigation in this valley.
Which has been very helpful for farmers.
Without it, we would not be we would be a desert here.
So
we get about 15 inches of rain a year.
Did that flooding then, Martha, change the whole direction of the river? Did it
changed the whole riverbed? It changed the topography of the land. It changed the farms. It changed the highways. It changed the railroad lines. It changed everything.
I bet it changed
everything had to be restored.
But it changed the wildlife also.
Yeah, I'm sure it did. And I'm sure it was part of the reason that it took so long for electricity to get to our part of the county. Because we're not right on the river. We're far enough away that the river was the riverbed, and the river valley were the big focus for a long time of restoration.
Okay, sure. Are you on an REC then?
Tell me what that is.
A rural electric cooperative?
Yes. Yeah. Ours comes out of Cambridge, which is further west than we are, but yes, we are.
Okay.
Yes, our electricity in our Minokan area was a rural REC.
Rural electric.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they were necessary to.
Yeah, it didn't come to our part of the county until the late 50s. I know that it didn't, because there was no indoor plumbing. There was no running water. My grandma had a pump outside of her house for a long time. Well, she had it till not very long ago, but she used it. That's what she used it for.
Sure.
Everything.
Yeah.
I remember what our maternal grandmother had a pump in her house. I thought that was the most fascinating.
That's very cool.
Yeah, it was.
That's uptown.
But there was still the outdoor privy out back.
Yep.
Though.
Yes, there was. I hated that place.
Yeah. Well, it was necessary.
Yes, it was.
So, viewers, if you ever had the experience of watching the Lawrence Welk show, you probably saw the Irish tenor Joe Feeney. Now, tell us about Joe Feeney in your life, Martha.
I don't remember Joe Feeney, but my mother was good friends, personal friends with Joe Feeney. They were in college at the same time. And they were both in the music department because my mother was a very accomplished pianist.
Mm-hmm.
And that was her major in college was piano. And she was his most sought after accompanist. And I'm told that I was a baby at the time, and she would take me along to all of the rehearsals, and I would sit in my little seat on the floor in the practice room, and I would just listen.
Wow.
So I must have been good at, but I think I was pretty little at the time, but she was his accompanist until he left. And as I understand, he was from North Dakota or South Dakota.
I don't know.
I'm not sure which, but one of the Dakotas, and I'm thinking it was North Dakota.
We'll have to check that out.
Yes. Well, and Joe Feeney had a very strong voice, and for you to sit in awe as a child in your little seat in the practice room, that's cool.
I thought it was. I must have thought it was nice. I don't remember it at all, but I know my grandparents watched Welk every weekend. Man, that was their big thing. They'd have to watch Welk. And my grandma would say, well, we can watch him. We don't have to listen on the radio, which that's what they'd done before. They had, once they got electricity, then they could, and the TV, I'm sure it was black and white. I can remember hanging a colored scarf over the black and white TV and saying, now we have colored TV.
I like that.
Very good. Very good.
Well, were you always the designated one to go change the channels, turn the channels?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's no remotes, We kids were remotes.
So wonderful. So let's move on to a more modern time. We understand you have a quilting business. Now, how did that evolve?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure that was my granny's idea. I'm sure that she was looking down on that because she was a quilter. Only she had the old-fashioned wooden frames, and she would keep them in her living room, and they were so big you couldn't hardly walk around them, and her house wasn't very big. But she would have the ladies over to quilt. And sometimes they just tied quilts in those days because it was fast. They didn't really do, quilting like we think of today as hand quilting. And I can't imagine her spending that much time on the project. She would not have that much time in her life, but she would have the quilt frames and she would always tie them. She taught me how to sew on an old Singer that hardly ran, but I love to sew. That's my favorite thing. That is my happy place. And as I got older, I really, really wanted a quilting business. And when I say that, I wanted to quilt for other people and by machine, not by hand. So when my dad passed away, that was about 15 years ago, probably, I got some life insurance money and I said, I'm going to buy a big quilt machine. And that's what I used some of my money for, was a bill. And I started my business, and it didn't take me very long to pay for my machine. And now I quilt a lot. I've always got 3 or 4 projects in line for people to quilt on. I just bought a new machine not too long ago, and I was feeling very I was having buyer's remorse. But my old machine was giving it up, and I was afraid it was going to quit for good, and I was going to be high and dry. So
Martha, do you sell quilt fabrics too?
I don't sell fabrics. I just do quilts. And I do a lot of I started out this business by just doing t-shirt quilts because everybody knew I sewed and they quilted, and so they'd ask me to make a memory quilt out of t-shirts. And I still do those. I probably do 20 or 25 of those a year.
Is it more for graduations?
Mostly for graduations, but not always. I have adults who they're like, oh, I have all these shirts from when I was working at such and such place. Can you make them into Sure, I can do that. And then from there, people were like, well, can you make a memory quilt with baby clothes? And I'm like, yeah, I could do that. So then I would take boxes full or whatever they sent me of baby clothes and I'd make a quilt. Sometimes they want it for a throw. Sometimes they'd want it for a wall hanging, whatever size they wanted. But I've done lots of those. Or like when someone passes away and they want a quilt out of mother's clothing or grandpa's clothing, or, like once I got a whole bag full of pearl snap shirts. That one was lots of fun. Or old jeans and overalls. I got overalls and pearl snap shirts in one pile.
That made a heavy one.
Yeah, it does. It does. So they're kind of fun and people like them because they're keepsakes. But then I do other quilting as well. Just if someone has made a quilt and they want it quilted, I do that for them as well.
Wonderful.
So these memory quilts, are they applique, or do you cut pieces of fabric for the out of them that for the particular pattern that you're working with?
It just depends what they want. I've had people say, just take pieces of them. I don't care. And then I've had people say, oh, can you leave them whole? Oh. And then you almost have to applique them. Those get really thick.
Yeah.
Those are challenging. It's not hard to cut those pearl snap shirts and leave the pocket or the pearl snaps on there and make a 5-inch square. That's not hard. But when they want something that, I want to be able to see that little sleeper that baby wore, that's a different deal.
Yes.
Right.
Back when your grandma was quilting, were the fabrics that she used mainly from garments that no longer were serviceable, or would she ever purchase new fabrics or trade?
I think she did some of each, Janine, because I can remember her having, I can remember her cutting up fabrics which were from garments, but I can also remember her with some quilts that this is so telling of those people who never wasted anything. Her favorite thing was double knit.
Oh.
And she would make those quilts out of double knit, like old leisure suits.
Yes.
Oh, no.
Or, a lot of women's clothing in those days was double knit. Well, the half-life on that stuff is 700 years. So they're probably still in the landfill.
Good old polyester.
Yes, it lasted forever. And then she would use polyester batting, which now I would never consider that ever.
No.
But that's what they had.
Yes. Did she work with feed sack fabrics at all?
I can remember her having some feed sacks, but she used them for tea towels that I know of.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Well, just think of how though when you were sewing and all you had was cotton or wool.
Yes.
And seam allowances had to be finished. It took so much more effort to sew something.
Yes, and your sewing machine wasn't nearly as nice as it is today.
And the pinking shears became very
Oh my gosh. Did you ever have a pinking shears that lasted more than about a half a year?
Well, yeah.
I tell you, we must have been hard on those dudes. Maybe it was the polyester. I don't know.
Yeah, that's right.
Could have been. Yes. Well, how fun for you to be able to do that. Do you ever, when you're quilting, then the special stories of your grandma come to mind?
Well, just the fact that she would always tell stories while she did it. She always told stories. And the stories she would tell would be about growing up, or about being a young wife, or when my dad was a little boy, or those were the stories. And that's why we loved to hang out with her. Just always stories. And they always had a reason why they were there. They weren't just a random story. And I can never remember her saying, when I said, Grandma, tell us a story, I can never remember her saying, oh, I can't think of anything. She would just tell a story.
Did your children get the opportunity to hear any of those stories?
No, not really, because she had a stroke. I think my older children were very, very young when she had a stroke, and then she was in the nursing home. She just didn't want to live like that, and she told them that. She's like, nope, no feeding tubes, no nothing. I just want to go be with Jesus. And that's how she lived too.
What an example.
Yes.
For her.
I wish that my children could have known her.
Yes.
Because she was truly an inspiration to me.
Well, how wonderful it would be for you to record a lot of those stories as they come to mind, just to have them for your kiddos and grandchildren.
I wish I could recall those stories.
Oh, okay.
Some of them come to my mind sometimes, and I write them down. But
sure. Well, and also the more you think about it, the more that they will come to mind.
Yes. Yes.
That's kind of how this book evolved. We just started thinking and talking and remembered.
Yeah, Martha, did your grandma ever talk about Christmases? Or do you remember?
You know what she did at Christmases? This was so funny, but she would never buy a Christmas tree. Okay. She would go out and cut one down. Well, where we live, that meant it was a cedar tree. And when you bring a cedar tree in the house, oh my goodness, the smell and the cedar trees are evil when you bring them indoors. Okay. But that's what she always had at Christmas. So she wouldn't put it up too early or it would just become overwhelming. And I remember more than once there would be a bird nest in there somewhere because, it was just a tree she cut out of the ditch or the pasture somewhere and brought it in. And then we would make the things for the tree. She'd had a few things that she put on there, and we always, I don't know what, I think we always had lights on there that I can remember, but we would make paper chains and we would make popcorn strings and we would make all kinds of things to put on the trees. And then she would help me sew things to put on the trees, little ornaments to sew to put on the trees. But they were always homemade things.
Yes.
That's
Do you
just
have
how
any of
she
those
was.
left?
I wish I did. I wish I did. But I have been very careful to keep those things for my grandkids because, in those days, I don't think Grandma thought of them as keepsakes. I really don't.
Yes.
I have a couple old polyester quilts, which, like I said, will probably last 700 years. But they're not beautiful quilts. They're utilitarian quilts. And Grandma and her sister, Grandma had two sisters and a brother, I think, but they all came up the hard way. They grew up poor and they grew up with a mother who was able to provide things for them. Their father had been killed in an accident. A horse and wagon ran away with him, evidently, or something, and that's how he was killed. And so my great grandmother raised her children the last half of their lives by herself. And so things were tough, and she knew how to do everything by herself. She was she was a very strong lady.
Well, I think a lot of women in those days had to be, especially if you lived on the prairie.
Yes. I can remember when I lived in her house for a short while after we were first married. And and she was still alive at that time, but I can remember one of the bedrooms. We could never open the windows in that house because they were just terrible, when single pane glass, and the whole 9 yards, and we just painted them and painted them shut basically. And she's like, "Oh yeah, we could never open those." She said, because whenever we would open them, the dirt from the 30s would come falling in from the inside of the house. And I'll bet you if we looked at the inside, instead of insulation between those walls, there was probably dirt.
Right. Good guess.
And that's what she would say. She'd say, I can remember looking out the window for days and days and days, and you couldn't see anything. And she'd also told me once that there wasn't enough grass, even in the ditch or anywhere, that she could find to put in the nesting boxes so the eggs wouldn't get broken. And she said, in the end, my mother brought me some old newspapers and I shredded them up and used them in those nesting boxes because we didn't even have enough like grass to put in the boxes to keep the eggs from getting broken.
Oh my goodness. That's tough.
Yeah, that's just how they, but you know, I don't remember it being a complaining thing. I remember it was a story that you have everything you need if you just look around.
Mm-hmm.
That's what her attitude about it was. You're going to be fine. Just look around. You have what God will give you, exactly what you need when you need it.
Yes, yes. Well, and think of when credit, the opportunity to have credit, and how that changed our nation. I think how it changed the philosophy of money handling.
Yes, it changed the economics of the nation.
Yes.
Yep, sure did.
Okay.
Oh, Martha, we're up out of time already. How fun this has been to learn of your story and with your family, especially your grandma's, and the life that she lived, which so impacted you. And I'm sure it's impacted your children and your grandchildren also.
Right. Yeah.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Martha.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome.
Pleasure. So, viewers, Martha did not grow up in the 50s, but thanks to her grandmother, she pictured them and lived them throughout her childhood. Those decades continue to influence her life today. So, viewers, we welcome you to come again next week to learn about more of to be educated about the 1950s. Until then, tell your friends, even your relatives, about this 1950s fun chat. Until then, toodaloo.
Bye-bye.
Bye.